I got to show my deepest respect for those who risk their lives and freedom to stand up for the truth. Wikileaks reveals what's going on behind the curtains of our so-called leaders. In this world of globalization, is it possible to be enough of threat? Wikileaks will stand strong as a global movement, which overcomes the lies and barriers of governmental propaganda. We support Wikileaks, now and forever. Thank you.
We have engaged knowledge individuals. No one can be aware of tornado fire.
We got this.
God damn it, Kyle.
Wiki is leaking, now the truth is speaking, revealing real faces of those in high places. Unveil their disguise so we see through those lies. Unmasking the leaders, join the WikiLeaks readers.
This is Bob Lederer with John Riley reporting for Out FM on WBAI 99.5 FM. And we're here at Fort Meade, Maryland. And today we've just finished the 6th hearing in the court-martial of accused whistleblower Bradley Manning, the openly gay Army intelligence analyst who is facing 22 charges stemming from his alleged disclosure of nearly 750,000 documents and videos to WikiLeaks. Some of these materials show evidence of war crimes and other inappropriate conduct by the U.S. government and its allies. The pretrial hearings have been presided over by military judge Denise Lind. The actual court-martial trial, over which she will also preside, is not expected to begin until sometime next year. Joining us to explain the significance of developments at this 4-day hearing are two guests. Kevin Gosztola is the co-author with Greg Mitchell of Truth and Consequences, the U.S. versus Bradley Manning, and he also blogs for firedoglake.com. Adam Klasfeld is a reporter for the Courthouse News Service, and he's based in New York City. Both of them have covered many of the hearings to date in the Bradley Manning case. And thank you for joining us on Out FM. And Kevin, since you literally wrote the book on the case, let me start with you. Why don't you summarize the 22 charges that Private Manning is facing and what the maximum sentence he could be looking at?
So the most significant charge is the aiding the enemy charge that says he gave intelligence to the enemy through WikiLeaks. So he aided them indirectly. And that could mean he would be put in prison for life without parole. That's the max I would think he could get. And then the other charges have to do with violating or prejudicing the good order and discipline and dignity of the military. And those charges, there's many charges. There's more than 10 charges that are like that. And each of those have about 10 years, I think, that carry with those. And then there are charges that have to do with whether he exceeded authorized access on his computer. And I think those are all 10 years as well.
And Adam Klasfeld, how do you see kind of the overall importance of the charges against Bradley Manning?
Well, I think both parties have said since the court-martial started, this is a unique case. This will help determine the way the military deals with when someone discloses information on the internet. How will the country handle it? The repercussions will be felt all around the world. How freely will people be able to access the information? What restrictions will there be? It has enormous consequences. Well, to me, the one thing that really struck out to me when every time we see this a hearing on this case, someone says, whether it's a judge or whether it's Bradley Manning's lawyers, they constantly get back to the fact that this is a completely unique case. No one has ever dealt with this case before. Bradley Manning is charged under the Espionage Act, yet the government doesn't accuse him of spying. There wasn't anything on behalf of any particular nation, and if you read Bradley Manning's chat logs, which, you know, the authenticity has been disputed by the defense, but if you read his words, he says that he did this for public knowledge, not for a country, not for any particular nation. So it's its own unique thing. And obviously, WikiLeaks has had an enormous influence on global policy, and this case will help determine the future of the press, the future of how we access information, what will happen. It has huge ramifications to the way we think about the nature of information, the way we think about national security, the way we think about all of these issues, and what will happen to those who do step forward and share information that someone determines to be classified or sensitive or anything like that.
This week's hearing gave the prosecution and the defense a chance to argue and the judge to rule on several rules about the conduct of Manning's court-martial, as well as what documents the prosecution should be required to turn over to the defense so they can prepare their case. Kevin Gosztola, what do you think was the most important ruling made by Judge Lind this week, and why?
Well, the most important ruling was the ruling that found in favor of the government that the defense could be prevented from raising evidence that showed actual damage or harm was caused by WikiLeaks, or that it was caused by Manning releasing this information allegedly to WikiLeaks. And this is very significant for the fact that it appears David Coombs, Manning's defense lawyer, built a lot of his case around being able to discuss this evidence. But now the judge has been won over. She's been won over by this idea presented by the prosecutors that it is not part of the charges and that the defense should not be able to raise this evidence when they discuss it in court. And going forward, what this means is that any discussion about damage from both the government and the defense is going to be entirely hypothetical. So this ruling is good for the government. It's good for the government agencies that don't want any attention on what actually happened as a result of the leaks, because members of the public who have seen headlines probably know numerous government officials said that there was damage, national security was placed at risk, and in the whole story, people might be wondering what exactly did happen. Well, in this trial, we're not likely to get too much information about what did happen anymore. Up to this point, we've gotten some details, actually. In fact, State Department witnesses testified in June about actual damage to an extent. It came up in testimony. And now it's all hypothetical. So when the government talks, they'll be saying could cause damage. And they'll just be talking about the evidence as if it could cause damage. And the same with the defense, I guess. I mean, the defense could still talk about it hypothetical. They could say this information could not cause damage, but they would be talking about it as if Bradley Manning knew it could not cause damage when he committed the act.
Well, let me ask you, Adam, about the implication of this ruling, because as I understood what the defense attorney was saying, that the charge that Bradley Manning was responsible for the unauthorized disclosure of classified information that he should have known could injure the interests of the United States, that in order to undermine that claim, the defense needs to be able to show what I believe they were saying out of the mouths of the State Department themselves, is saying, well, actually, now with a year's hindsight or a year and a half's hindsight, it didn't really do any damage. It didn't compromise any sources. Nobody was injured or killed because Their name was disclosed, and actually very few names were disclosed in the WikiLeaks documents. So how do you read the significance of this ruling by Judge Lin that excludes all of this from the guilt or innocence part of the trial, although she does say it can be used in the penalty phase to determine whether this should have any impact on the penalty based on if there was little damage? Perhaps that might be used to say his sentence should be lighter. How do you read all this?
One of the things that Coombs said in anticipation of the argument is that the defense would be cut off at the knees, essentially. I mean, during the hearing, that it's the military equivalent of a grand jury. During the grand jury, a lot of information came out that seemed to suggest that the lawyer did not argue that, hey, Manning didn't do it. He didn't spend a lot of time on that. Again, it's still an allegation. We might find out something differently at trial. So he hanged it on they didn't cause damage, and there is a lot of evidence to that effect. According to the defense, they've been seeing, as you said, document after document from the U.S. Department of State. They say little to no damage, and all of that, I imagine, will come out at trial. So to lose that is a pretty big development, and a big setback for the Manning defense. I would also say that probably, I'd go out on a limb and say all is not lost for Manning supporters and for the Manning defense. They are getting large amounts of that information, and that information is building a record. All that information is going to come out, whether at trial or at sentencing if they get there. Whether the information, it will come out at sentencing, what all of these thousands of documents say. And possibly, this is what I meant to say, there is this, in the sense that all may not be lost for the Manning defense if they get to question every classified document that came out during the hearings was done by people known as original classification authorities. The Manning defense is going to get to test them. Say, if one of them appears biased, she may say, hey, you can confront them on that. Why are you saying there is all of this, that the sky will fall, as he said, in the military equivalent of a grand jury? In his closing arguments, Coombs said, he used a Chicken Little example. The sky has not fallen, the sky will not fall as a result of information coming out. And so whether information comes out at his trial, whether information comes out at sentencing, whether information comes out at appeal, there's a long road ahead. And one of the interesting things that I noticed, and these are the things that never make it into news copy, the experience of being in that courtroom and looking at Manning when that ruling was read. And before that ruling was read, it's a very interesting thing because he had a very relaxed face, and he's been very relaxed throughout trial. You would think after this crushing ruling that the judge says he's been cut off at the knees, there would be a little bit of fear or sorrow. I think that all of the parties see a much longer end game, and that as much big of a setback, and it was a huge setback, as the Bradley Manning defense had today, there is a long road ahead.
This is Bob Lederer with John Riley reporting for Out FM, WBAI 99.5 FM. And we're outside of Fort Meade, Maryland, just after the latest day of the pretrial hearing of Bradley Manning. And we're here with 3 members of the Bradley Manning Support Network who've been in court this week to show their support for Bradley Manning. And We're going to ask each of them what brought them here and what their assessment is of the proceedings so far. First, why don't you introduce yourself, where you're from, why you came here?
Well, my name is Jeff Patterson. I'm the project director of Courage to Resist, and I'm on the steering committee of the Bradley Manning Support Network. Steering committee, or the support network, has been responsible for hundreds of protests around the world for Bradley as an ad hoc collection of individuals. The support network has also been responsible for providing to Bradley his legal civilian defense counsel and his expert witnesses. A grassroots undertaking that's spent almost $250,000 now to give Bradley a fighting chance in this military court-martial proceedings. Today we heard about the arguments of whether the outcome of Bradley Manning's action should even be taken into account. And that goes to his motives, the outcome, the lack of harm, and beyond the lack of harm, the great good that's come of the Arab uprising, the end of the Iraq War, for example. And now we're looking forward to the next hearing in August 26th, where the military will be put on trial and be forced to take account for its torture of Bradley Manning for the first 10 months of his imprisonment at Quantico. Bradley Manning's attorney, David Coombs, will be arguing for a dismissal of all charges. But if that doesn't happen, there's precedent for Bradley to be given 10 days credit for every day he was tortured. So if Bradley's final sentence is 10 years, that would mean that Bradley would leave prison almost immediately. So it's very important. And that's a lot of people around the world first learned about Bradley because of his mistreatment. We're going to be back here, and Bradley's lawyer will be speaking for the first time at a public event in Washington, D.C. to help raise money.
And we're also joined by Emma Cape, also from the Bradley Manning Support Network. Emma, you came from San Francisco. Tell us why you're here.
That's correct. My name is Emma Cape, and I work for the Bradley Manning Support Network. I would say I support Bradley for a reason many others do, that being that we need whistleblowers. We need more transparency in our government. I became an anti-war activist about 10 years ago. I was discouraged with the lack of investigative reporting done by mainstream U.S. journalists. I started getting my news online. I started reading overseas reporting of the wars to find out what was really going on. And in the chat logs attributed to Bradley Manning, that was a lot of his frustration too, was that he felt the American people weren't getting the truth about what was going on in the war that he was participating in. And he wanted to remedy that. Now we saw today in court, actually, that the government is alleging that posting information on the internet is the same as giving that information to a foreign agent. That is a major accusation. It's going to affect how Americans get their news. We also learned that the government believes that acting as a whistleblower to post important information online about secret government actions is a crime that should be punishable by life in prison. As an American, I do not support that. I do not think that is the kind of Justice Department we want to live in. And I think we have to make the world a safer place for whistleblowers if we're going to have foreign policies that reflect real American values.
Okay, and we're also joined by Nathan Fuller, who's also with the Bradley Manning Support Network. And tell us why you're here and what did you find most significant about this week's proceedings so far?
Sure. I'm Nathan Fuller. I drove down here from Trenton, New Jersey. I'm a writer and editor for the Bradley Manning Support Network at bradleymanning.org. I write notes from each of the hearings. I support Bradley. I think we should all sacrifice for Bradley because he sacrificed for us. His life is on the line for educating the public about what our government is doing with our money, with our people and our money. Something that came out earlier this week that I thought was pretty interesting is that his lawyer David Coombs suggested that we swap out Wikileaks for the New York Times and see if the New York Times would be on trial, because the New York Times, the Washington Post published top secret information almost every day, and the cables that Bradley Manning is accused of leaking is either secret or lower, so not top secret information. But you don't see the New York Times, you don't see the Washington Post or Bob Woodward ever being put on trial for aiding the enemy indirectly. And I think that really highlights the hypocrisy of the government in this case.
Okay, and what was your assessment of the argument this afternoon about whether the government should be, or whether the defense should be allowed to introduce evidence that no actual harm or so-called damage occurred to the U.S. government as a result of these disclosures, even by the account of some of the top officials of the U.S. government.
Well, I think, as David Coombs said, it's pretty revealing of what the government believes. They don't really have any evidence that any harm was caused. Top officials have said that harms were modest at best. And it's been 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years, since some of these cables have been released, and we don't see any harm. We don't see any government alleging any serious harm. And the fact that the government doesn't want to allow that into the discussion really highlights the fact that they don't have anything to show for it. And I think when we see that no harm was caused by these releases, we start to wonder why the cables were classified in the first place. And I hope that comes to light.
Now, one of the points made yesterday by the defense attorney for Bradley Manning was that, well, this was during a discussion of what questions would be permitted to be asked to the potential jurors who are called panel members in the military. And one of them related to, actually 6 of them related to his homosexuality. He described his client as a gay man, and a question was allowed about the potential jurors' attitude towards the don't ask, don't tell policy, now repealed, but also towards the question of the so-called gender identity disorder, and which the defense attorney said evidence would be introduced that Bradley Manning was dealing with this condition. What do you think is the significance of these issues in the overall case?
Well, I think Coombs would be asking these questions to get a sense of the juror's mindset, if they have a predisposition against homosexuals, or if they have a feeling against gender identity disorder for whatever reason. This member questionnaire is meant to get at the background and the kind of the political or philosophical mindset of these jurors. And that's something he would want to know, if these people have some kind of bias against that kind of person.
So what do you think would be the significance if the judge rules tomorrow? I believe she will be ruling tomorrow on whether the defense can introduce evidence that no actual harm came from the disclosures. How would that, or would that, damage Bradley Manning's ability to mount a defense?
Well, I'm not going to speak for David Coombs. I don't purport to know the rest of his legal reasonings, but I think it'll still certainly come out in the mitigating or sentencing aspect of the case.
So just talk to us for a minute about your assessment of the overall nationwide movement to support Bradley Manning in general, but also particularly within the LGBT community.
Well, as far as the LGBT community goes, just recently, I believe it was June 24th, we had pride parades across the country. And in major cities, from Chicago to New York to San Francisco, we had giant Bradley Manning contingents supporting Bradley Manning as a gay figure, an icon, really. But more generally, the response has been really inspiring. We've had solidarity actions around the world, around the country, at every hearing. We've had a little vigil right here at Fort Meade at every hearing. Donations keep coming in from around the world. Grassroots movement to fund his legal defense. So we need more people to come out always, but it's been inspiring so far. We really hope people come out to this August 26th and 27th, the 27th hearing and this August 26th event in D.C. I think it's going to be, it's going to turn the tide for Bradley Manning's support.
Okay, thanks very much.